STEM song. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. S and T and E and M. That is how we spell. S is for science, T is for technology, E for engineering, M for math. STEM is fun for you and me. What will we learn today? Let's see.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the MEFA Podcast. My name is Jonathan Hughes, and you just heard from a whole bunch of people, including our guest on the show today, Barbara Jorda, the co-founder and program director of STEM Beginnings. Now, she was the one leading that song, as you may have guessed. That audio and video was taken at the public library in the town of Douglas, Massachusetts. And typically, we talk about college and career readiness on the show to an audience of students or parents of students who are getting ready to start that part of their lives. But we at MEFA also touch upon broader educational topics too. And MEFA Pathway, for example, is our college and career portal. And part of that, especially for kids in earlier grades, is helping to introduce them and getting them to hone the topics that they're interested in. And one area that you've probably heard about over the years is the one that we just heard a song about, and that is STEM. And we thought that we would highlight Barbara and her organization, STEM Beginnings, which brings STEM education to kids as young as 2 or 3 to help foster the next generation of STEM leaders. So she was good enough to invite us to a lesson that she was doing at the Douglas Public Library. And we'll be cutting to that every so often. So if you're listening instead of watching this episode, that's what you're hearing. So you may want to check this one out on our YouTube channel. So many thanks to her and all the parents and kids that joined us on that day. I'll be back after the segment to wrap up. But now, let's meet our guest on the show.
So my name is Barbara Jorda, and I am the co-founder and program director for STEM Beginnings. I am a mother to 2 children. I have a 19-year-old now who is a freshman in college, and I have a senior in high school.
What is your education story?
I am a physical therapist by profession. I studied in the Philippines, so I graduated with a degree in physical therapy, and I worked as a physical therapist, but my heart wasn't in there. So I eventually took my master's in early childhood development. So it's family life and child development at the University of the Philippines. And that's where I found my calling. So back home, I started a preschool. It is family owned and family run. It's still in operation. It's a preschool for children up to 6 years old, I believe. And I left that in 2006 when we moved here in the US because of my husband's job. So started a new life here. I had a 2-month-old baby and a 13-month-old baby when we moved here.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was a stay at home mom for several years. And I went back to teaching little by little.
And where does the interest in STEM come from then?
So around 2013, I think, I felt I was ready to teach already, to go back to teaching. But around that time, there was that push for STEM in the national level already. So I believe back then, President Obama had this, I think, Educate to Innovate program, but it was more geared for high school kids so that you would venture into STEM for college. And so you could end up with STEM professions. So back then, when I was thinking of trying to go back, maybe set up a preschool again or something, I thought about STEM and how a lot of times when kids get into middle school, they already tell you, I hate science, I hate math. So in my mind, I want kids to get started early on and enjoy it. When kids aren't doing worksheets, when they don't have to read workbooks and stuff, then I get to introduce the concepts of science and math in a fun way. And that's where I was like, okay, I think this would be good. And I actually had to consult my own kids. So they were 8 and 7 years old back then. And, that was around the time that we were looking for activities to do. And As a teacher, I was always looking for teachable moments. I always wanted activities where they could learn. But for children, they want things, activities that are fun, that they get to do stuff, that there's craft that they can bring home. So it was that I wanted a collaboration between the learning concept and the fun concept. And so that's where I thought, why don't we do STEM?
So, what is STEM?
It's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. Science is not treated as just science, but it can be, you can teach it in collaboration with technology, with math, and with engineering. So, as far as little kids are concerned, as you saw, we start off with a song, where kids are able to identify what it is. I tell them that science is a way of thinking. It's about discovering things, asking questions, being curious. And when we say technology, it would be any object or tool that was created to help solve a problem. It's a way of doing. So a lot of times I tell them that technology would be anything that's not nature. So anything that you buy, chair, a cell phone, a pen, a paperclip, anything that was machine made or man made that was created to help solve a problem. So then engineering, I tell them, it's about problem solving. And I tell them that it's a way of doing. It's how you problem solve, how you create things to solve a problem, and how often engineers are the ones creating the technology that we get to use. And when we talk about math, I say it's a way of measuring. So I talk about sorting your toys, talk about measuring, learning numbers, doing puzzles, counting. So um, then when we do our lessons, our STEM lessons, it's a collaboration of all those four.
Can you tell me the story of how you created this STEM Beginnings program?
When my kids were 8 and 7 years old, I think,
Mhm.
around that time. So, it was over dinner table. What one of those times when we were asking them, "What do you want to do? Do you want to do soccer? Do you want to do piano? Things like that." And I was just trying to pick their brains and trying to see what they were into. And as I mentioned earlier, that was also around the time that I wanted to go back to teaching, and I was thinking of having my own preschool. And so when we were talking about STEM and how I was so interested in getting it for younger kids. That was when it all started. So the kids got so excited, and I said, "What do you think about a class where you do experiments, where you do building activity?" My son back then was all into Legos, and he goes, "Oh," and they came up with a name. We over dinner table, I asked him, "What do you think would be a good name if we start something up?" And they started. My son was all into Legos, so he'll maybe brick by brick or something. And we were just brainstorming. Then Brianna, I believe, said STEM starters or something like that. And then we all agreed that STEM beginnings was good because they said it's good to start STEM. Of course, I had to explain to them what STEM was, but um, starting it off early on. So I think back then, I would be, I think a lot of people thought STEM was just for older people, older
Mm,
students.
mm.
I don't think there was a push much on that time, around that time, or nobody even realized that it can be taught to little kids
Mm.
because STEM felt like such a big word.
Of you setting up here.
Okay.
So
Yep.
what is it? What was
Bird
it again?
nest engineering. Yep. So we're gonna show the kids how birds where we're going to learn a bit about birds and different kinds of birds, and then we're going to show them samples. I have samples of actual nests, and so they would understand how birds engineer nests and how birds are the engineers of nature. Oftentimes you would think of it as robotics, you think of it as computers and things like that, not realizing that STEM is also about learning about the weather, learning about cycles and body systems, learning about the engineering design process and things like that, and how that can be simplified for little kids. Initially I was thinking of a STEM preschool, but then it would be very limiting. Like I wanted to have a bigger reach, that more kids would get to know that STEM can be fun for little kids.
What are the age ranges there of the students?
Okay, so the youngest that we have would be 3 years old, although we would always have a couple of 2 years old. So, but it's usually three would be my youngest. And Um, the oldest student I would have would be around 10 years old, and that's around fourth grade. So we have programs for preschool, for the preschool age children, and then we also have programs from kindergarten to fourth grade at the schools.
Yeah, so where are the classes then? What types of, you mentioned schools, I know it was at a library.
Mhm.
How does that all work?
I go to schools, and it depends on the school. So it's a collaboration between us and the parent teacher organization, the PTO, or I connect directly with the principal. It is offered as an after school program
Okay.
to schools, and so parents sign up for it. So kids get dismissed maybe around 3 o'clock or 3:30, and instead of going home, they stay for another hour as an after school program for STEM. We have like 12 kids to a class, and then we have multiple classes running. So if we have a program that's from kindergarten to fourth grade, then we divide them according to grade levels. So like maybe kindergarteners and graders would go together, and things like that. And then we also have the preschool classes at the libraries. We are sponsored by the YFCP, which is the YMCA Family and Community Partnership. And they are able to offer our STEM classes through their they call it young scientists. And it is done at the libraries. And it's made possible through a CFC grant from the Department of Early Education and Care. And then we also go to preschools. So that's another thing, that we go to preschools during the day. And another thing would be through Parks and Rec. So we also collaborate with the Parks and Recreation. So we would be one of the vendors that would offer after school programs or camps. There was a time when we were doing um, week long camps, STEM camps for children.
And what type of lessons do you teach?
A lot of times my lessons would be seasonal. So for example, if it's winter, we do a lesson, for example, on snowplow engineering. So we talk about how the snowplows work, and then we try to test them out with our cars and try to put different kinds of attachments to our cars. um, we could do like for the spring we could talk about bird nest engineering. So my friends, we are going to learn about birds, and we're going to think of birds as engineers of nature. And why do you think fly? And they fly, you're right. So why do you think fly? Why do you think fly? Exactly, why do you think birds are like engineers? Because they fly. Because they fly, and guess what? They make their own houses. All right, raise your hand. All right, raise your hand if anyone here has tried building their own house. You have? All right, maybe with toys. Right? What do you use for building your own house? Blocks. Blocks. What else? Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets! But we are also not limited to seasonal topics. So we would also have topics about engineering a bridge, engineering a tower, playground equipments. We do slime, and we talk about the chemical reactions that take place to make it into slime, or putty, or silly putty, and things like that. So I always get challenged by a difficult concept, because then if we're able to make it simple
Mm.
and relatable for children, then my goal is achieved. So can anyone think of something that they might use to build a nest? Sticks. What else? Wonderful. Yes. Wood. All right. Wood chips might be good. Yes.
How do you come up with the lessons, and how do you refine them if they're not working? What's that creative process like?
All right. So I always love starting with a good storybook. So are you ready for my story? Especially for the little kids. This is The Best Nest by P.D. Eastman. Are we all ready? We used to call it storybook STEM, and it starts off with a good storybook, and then I kind of extract the STEM learning from there. And then after that story, there would be STEM challenges that they get to enjoy. They get to build something. They get to create a craft. They get to do, a game. My friends, go find a spot, and we're gonna play a game of bingo. And then, we brainstorm, and we try to figure out, so what did we learn today, and things like that. Bingo again! Bingo!
Hmm.
and a craft. Often kids would be, are we taking something home today? They always ask, are we taking home something? Sometimes, often they do. I would always like for them to bring home something so that they can have that conversation with family and tell them, I made the sun, I made a sun craft. And then they talk about, SPF and things like that. So we do newsletters. I should send you a newsletter that we send to families after each class so that because we don't want it to be treated just as a program that kids do. I want the collaboration with families so that, when I send them the newsletter, it would come with a photo collage of what happened in class. It would come with a blurb on what we learned. It would come with suggestions of books that they can borrow from the library to read with their child. And it comes with additional activities that they can do to reinforce what they learned in STEM class. All right. So, okay, hold on. Before I distribute the nest, I want to show you how. Remember earlier I talked about weaving? So look at this nest over here. So this nest got together without any glue. They no, they didn't have needles to sew it. Um they didn't have hammers, they didn't have nails, but all they had to do was put them together using mud. Mud is their glue, and they weave them together, getting whatever they might find around them.
So zooming out, you mentioned that a lot of people think STEM or thought STEM was for older kids, and you had this vision of bringing it for younger children, which is great. But why do you think it's important to get kids acquainted with STEM at an early age?
I always, I am a preschool teacher. So I always believe in the formative years. Those first 6 years are very critical because it's when that, it's around that time that they start getting curious about things, that they start doing things. So if you get them, interested in certain topics early on while things are still fun, before they even start reading, before they even start doing workbooks and worksheets, that a lot of times, kids don't like that. They say, oh, especially when I talk to my fourth grade students, they're like, oh, we don't like math because then they're doing worksheets. But if you give them an appreciation of the math concepts early on, through games, you sort the toys, you sort the blocks, or you measure the tower and things like that. You compare, or you do fractions when you do when we cook. Sometimes we have activities where we cook something or we make up where we make and they measure, like if we need 4 recipes, how many cups would that be, and things like that. So I feel that if you are able to introduce STEM early on, they're not going to be scared of math and science, and they're going to be interested, they're going to be more curious, and they're going to want to learn more. And by the time that they're in middle school and high school, they're not going to be scared. They're not going to think of it as hard because they've learned the easy way. They've learned it when it was still fun and when it involved hands-on activities. So my goal really is just to nurture that curiosity among little kids. And if they're curious and if they are allowed, given that chance to ask questions and to be curious and to figure things out, that I think is very important. You will develop into lifelong learners after that.
What impact do you think these courses have had on kids that you've taught? And are there any students that you know of who've had their sort of interest in STEM sparked by the
Mhm.
course?
I am in touch with some old students. I still see some of them. They have younger siblings that are in the program, and I like checking on them and just trying to find out if anyone actually got into STEM. The thing is with STEM, it's you're not just talking about those that want to be doctors or those that want to be engineers. It's such a wide, wide, wide concept. Like, maybe somebody who's interested in music engineering or something. I know there's so many majors in college now. There's one even that goes arts, technology and innovation and something like that. And you can be an artist, and still apply that STEM concept. My own two children, I mean, they've been with me from the very start. And my daughter Brianna is now doing nursing, and my son is gonna start engineering next in the fall. So I'd like to think that I was able to, help develop that interest. And a lot of, so when I see them on Facebook, a lot of parents would post like, oh, my son wants to be a doctor. And, of course, that wasn't because of me, but I would love to have some bragging rights and say, oh, he learned, he learned about the bones of the body in STEM class, or, we made blood when we learned about the heart and things like that. And I would love to, think that I had a hand in establishing some, foundation, or even that encouraging that curiosity.
If somebody wanted to get in touch, if they wanted to volunteer, if they wanted to attend a class or have their school, be part of the program, how would they get in touch with you?
Email me at info@stembeginnings.com. And yep, send me any. I love it when students would help out in classes. There would be high school kids who would ask us, oh, can we shadow or can we help out? And, maybe it's part of their community hours, service hours or something like that. But even the ones who are still confused on what they want to do for college, I would welcome having them, join our teachers, or even, help in coming up with new lessons, things like that. So, yep, just send me an email, info@stembeginnings.com, and we will see how we can help them, and how they can help us too.
Well, you were gracious enough to allow us to film one of your classes, and it was a lot of fun. And I just thank you for that, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, appreciate it, and thanks for joining us. Yesterday was really fun. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna sing our STEM song, and by the end of the song, we have to make sure that our bird is not going to fall. All right, are you ready? Hold on. We're gonna balance it over here. Whoop. We have to make sure that the nest is not gonna fall and the bird is not gonna fall. Everyone ready? Are you ready? Okay. S and T and E and M. That is how we spell STEM. S is for T is for technology, E for engineering, M for math. STEM is fun for you and me. What did we learn today? Tell me.
All right, well, that was today's show, folks. I would like to thank Barbara for sharing her time with us, for inviting us to her STEM Beginnings class. And I'd also again like to thank the Douglas Public Library and all of the parents who allowed us to be there to record. I really appreciate it. And just a reminder that if you liked what you heard today and you want to hear more from us on planning, saving, and paying for college and career readiness, well, then you can follow the show, and you can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And please remember to leave us a review if you're so inclined. It helps us to keep everything going here and getting this show out to folks like you. I would like to thank our producer, Sean Connolly. I'd also like to thank Lisa Rooney, Lauren Dans, AJ Yee, Meredith Clement, and Christina Davidson for their assistance in getting the show posted. Once again, my name is Jonathan Hughes, and this has been the MEFA Podcast.